back 10 seconds and I'll pay £100. The champion of Queen.
Mr. Buckerby, Ralph with his Chevy utility. He's been out looking for dingoes. About the yellow tank near the Coonawarra boundary on Alaric. Waited there on a hot day and shot those three as they came into water. Just where we camped out at Coonawarra. Land marking. And, Ralph and another chap in the camp that I had rigged up down near the bore. We must have milk in the tea. And that's the yard that we built there to mark the lambs in, just by the bore on Coonawarra. Drafting them up, ready for marking. That's Ralph drafting, Pat Barge and Bob in the white shirt. Two fellas who are working there, pushing them up. This is sometime in '53. So Henry doing his best. Lambs are getting big too, and it's time for a mark. Bob and Pat. There they are, all ready for marking. Two boys catching, Ralph and Bob earmarking, tailing and castrating using the teeth in the traditional method. Ralph earmarking. Pat Barge holding him up for him. Counting the tails. That's the method to see how many we've done. All finished and letting them go. Just got them done in time with a heavy rain that night. That's myself with Tony. He also had for a long time. Spark looking on. Tony was a horse that was caught in the Brumbies out in Whitslow beyond the Cooper. Most unusual gait. Trot in front and walk behind. Get along at a tremendous speed, especially behind horses. Took a while to get him to settle down. He would tend to break, and you notice the unusual gait. A bit shy of the fella pointing the camera at him. Tony leading Willie, Peggy's pony. We sent him out to Buckerby from Narrabri. Another rodeo at Narramanga. Bit of trick riding there. I forget who these fellas were, a long time ago. Sticking there for a bit anyway. That's Ken Lahane, who after was married to Fleur Tully. Oh. Oh. Lunchtime at the Manga Radio. It's hard to tell who's who nowadays.
If horse gets out of ring, I heard him say, well, you jump into the ring then, pal, and you'll be quite okay.
And the buck-jump riding.
It's one you ought to know. It's always been the motto of my traveling rodeo. There never was a rider who never could be throwed, and there never was a bronco that never could be rode. So screw down the saddle, make it good and tight. Back from the ropes, please ask him as he rides. Pick up your mate,
wasn't badly hurt anyway.
a nasty fall. They're all the same to man trade, champions and all.
Out of Coonawarra, building the shipyard Coonawarra tank. Ralph and myself and Pat Barnes and Bob. Ralph and Bob cutting the rails to length using a circular saw, buzz saw. And then stacking them up there using the Ferguson tractor. It's progressed a bit since the bar and shovel days. There's myself trimming the rails to fit between the posts. You notice a little pair of posts with the rails dropped between them. And the final touches, trimming off the tops of posts with the buzz saw. And Willie's out in Buckley now. That's the sheriff's quarters where Peggy and I lived for about 6 months after we returned from up north. We were living there when Peter was born. Down to Victoria, the Presbyterian Church at Mitcham, wedding of Bob Painter and Val. Peggy in the golden youth that we had. It's January 1954. There's Bob with his 2 outsiders arriving at the church, bridesmaids, bridal car. And Val arriving for her wedding. There they are, emerging from the church. This is Bob Painton and his wife Val. Oh, who the various people were. Bob and Val. Attendants. Taking that to, yes, that's from the church for Val talking to Peggy. And the car to go off to the reception. That was up the Dandenong. I forget where it was, but it was a terrifically hot day. Back to Quilpie, the aerodrome Quilpie. Dad talking to George Harriman, Bessie and Mother on the left. There's the plane coming in. This is the strip out near the Eromanga Road. DC-3 coming into the terminal. George Harriman wheeling the steps up to the plane. Now, it's Peggy arriving with Peter. Peter about a week, 10 days old. This has gone there to meet them. Bessie and Mother admiring the new baby. And Whisty had come out on the plane with Peggy. I'd been in there previously and come home a few days earlier. Dad on the right, his mother admiring the new baby, and Mrs. Halpin. Mrs. Halpin looking around. Dad having a nurse, Peter. There, we're down at Maryborough now. Peggy's home. A few months later, we've gone down there. Peter's grown a little bit, sitting up.
Why was he born so beautiful? Why was he born at all?
Peggy with him out in the yard at her parents' place. And a little dog, Dandy. The dog we had, an terrier. Peter had a taste of horticulture even in those early days. Of December 1954, St Paul's Presbyterian Church of Valley, Brisbane, with the Anne Collins wedding.
Be sure and get me to the church on time.
Bessie and Miss Whisty, the bride, with Dad. Then there's the church, Mother, and I think that's Mrs. McCaskey behind her. Just outside after the wedding. Whisty and Colin with the bridesmaid. Colin and Whisty. Margaret Phillips. Peggy with Peter. Again. Mother. Mother just there. With Whisty and Mother, Dad, and Bessie. Dad and Ralph. Lamb. Peter. There's Colin just there. There's Uncle George on the left. A couple of friends of Whisty's from Charleville. And Colin and Whisty, they're just getting in the car there by the look of it. There we are, back to Yanunga. That was a rainbow that was very brilliant at the time. After a shower, I took that from the top of the tank stand out of the tank. The rainbow behind the little mill in the old boring plant at Yanunga. The Yanunga house is just across the creek. There's Batto the dog having a swim there. Peggy just coming up and taking Peter for a stroll. All the pets in attendance, Dandy, Spark, Bazza. Plus the two cats, the two white cats. Right, Yanunga on the bit of a lawn we had out front. Peggy with old Gus and white cat. And the dog. A pretty crabby old cat, never look at children play with him. Back in Brisbane for Bessie's wedding. It's the Park Presbyterian Church, South Brisbane. 4th of February, 1955. Peggy, and that's Alex McConaughey. Molly and Bill McConaughey. That's Bert and Lena. And Peter again, my friend. That's Uncle George talking to Mrs. Halpin. Joe Kinnear, Uncle George and Lance, I think. Mrs. Halpin talking to Peggy and Peter. Mother just getting out of the car. Bessie just arriving with Dad. Bessie. Approaching the church. There they are, all over. Emerging from the church. John and Bessie after their wedding. Over Philip. Peggy McConaughey. That's Bessie and John. Nora and Alan Wright, and, Ralph on the left, Mother and Mrs. McCaskey, Bessie and Westley, John and Bessie. Nora and Mrs. McConaughey. Nora and Alan Wright. That's Uncle George on the left, Mr. McConaughey and his brother. That's Mr. and Mrs. McConaughey, John's parents. It's Dad talking to Ralph McGeorge. That's Mrs. McGeorge. Bessie, Mother and Dad.
Aunt Hilda, mother's sister.
There we are, back in Narrabri, Queensland, of course. Down the backyard, Peggy taking Peter for a run around in the stroller. Peggy with her mother and Peter. The three of them coming out to the little side gate. That place, the father's old shed in the background where he used to do a lot of work. We had to get the Mercury, the car that we bought down there at that time. Peter with his grandmother. Grandfather, briefly. This was during a hazardous trip home we had. We had to leave the car in Muckadilla and we took it on the train and we were off again to Morven and went on by train to Quilpie. And then the train got held up in the floods. We had to come back to Charleville and get the plane and fly to Quilpie, and there was tremendous floods everywhere. From the flight out to Quilpie, that's the Bulloo River, if I remember rightly, just a bit north of Quilpie. Flood was 3 to 4 miles wide at that time. It was normally only 50 yards. Just circling around over Quilpie. It was completely surrounded by floodwater. Fortunately, it was built on a slight rise. Pinkilla Creek going in from the western side. That's a separate shot. We're crossing over the rocky crossing above Adavale in the Land Rover. And back to Yanunga. Ted Stewart doing some horse breaking there. That was one of the poles that we saw earlier, with the silver main tail. There's Ralph with Peter on their old pony there, having a ride around. I think that's the boy Stewart. Just as well as his quiet horse. Look at his lance fell off and injured his foot. We're taking Peter for a walk over towards the horse yard just behind the Yanunga house. Peter with the little carp that Mr. gave him. Wearing the suit that Peggy made for him out of an old pair of slacks. discovered something new. That was a stack of corrugated fibro roofing. Didn't realise the hazards involved with asbestos in those days. Off exploring. Over tank sinking plant. Just putting down the Boree tank out on the western side of Yanunga. Hydraulic equipment in this case. Johnny Jacobs, the Aboriginal fellow, trying to dig out a fox burrow. Peter in summer dress, by the side steps of Yanunga. Plus a potty lamb. That's the cabbages and sweet peas. That's Aboriginal girl, Monica, talking to Peter. She's really good with him too. She's looked after him lots of time. There are 2 or 3 kids of her own as well. There's Christine. This is just a baby. This was the occasion that we'd been to Quilpie. Peggy had taken Christine down to Maryborough in the final stages of her father's illness, and after her father died actually, and was bringing her mother back to Yanunga. And there was heavy rain, and we had to go right around by Ray and Taratsi by Land Rover to bring them back to Yanunga. It's about a 100-mile trip, and about 40 miles of it was like you see there. Stopped and boiled a billy along the way with Ralph and Patricia's sister, Janet Castle, who come to ride out with us. There's Peggy on the left, Ralph, Christine sitting up there as large as life, Jeanette and Peggy's mother.
Hey, rain, rain.
Aboriginals of Worley was alongside the road, been there for many years. This was Peggy's mother's first time out west. I'm sure she was impressed, especially with the roads.
Rain on me face, so muddy old in despair. You're a muddy, wet place. Hey, rain, hey, rain. And there's rain in me fear and rain in me grub, and they've just fitted anchors to the Garradunga pub. Hey, rain,
That's the
hey,
Horseback Gate at Taratsi. Jeanette on the left.
hey, rain, rain coming down on the cane of the roof.
We've gone in
of the town.
the previous day and there was a lot more water about than there was then.
River crocodile living in me fridge, and a bloody great tree on the Jubilee Bridge. Hey, rain, hey, rain. And the monsoon sky has sprung a leak, and the flying fish point to the Mill Spring Creek. Hey, rain, hey, rain. Hey, rain,
Yeah, back at Yanunga at last. A day or two later. Peggy was a baby Christine. It's out in the vegetable garden at Yanunga. And Ralph with a couple of Major Mitchell cockatoos, which he'd got from a nest and reared. There's a little dog, Dandy. Watch them put their crest up. Like the dog. That's a Buckabee, the shearer's quarters in the background. It's a shed. There's a shed behind there. The back of Yanunga, Smith's tank. We were cleaning the mud and sediment out of it, make it less boggy. Sediment collected over many years and the tank become very, very boggy. It has to be cleaned out. Rinse me out on the back of the truck. Pulling a silt scoop through the tank. Boiling the copper and wash day. No, get away from that copper. Now what can I find over here? In 1960, we'd gone up north after going to Maryborough, and Peggy's mother took ill and died, and we took Bob up to Ayr and went on to the Solaris place at Tully, and this is down at Mission Beach. That must be John Solaris, possibly. Peggy was Robin, and Christine, the red shorts. Robin. Robin again, modelling the latest in swimwear. And the road back from Mission Beach to the Solaris was a cassowary that was often seen along the road. So, yeah, there it is. Back at the Solaris' place. Elsie had put on a kids' party for Peter Solaris and Peter Brown, who were both just 6, about the same age. Elsie bringing out some goodies for the kids. Peggy with Peter and Christine with the ribbon in the hair. And Peter Solaris with fair hair. And Robin, smiling for the camera. Let's see who that little fellow is.
Happy birthday to you.
Oh, Elsie's friends and neighbours from around there, plus their children.
Birthday, dear. Happy birthday to you.
Elsie, bring out ice cream.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Putting up a tent, which must have been one of the birthday presents, I guess.
Happy birthday to
Just been waving a tennis racket around. There's some of the mothers. Looks like the food's all gone. Jump to 1964, where we're mustering, getting ready to leave Yanunga. It's all the broken scrub that we knocked over a few years before, a great growth of grass amongst it. Up above the Yanunga house, bringing it down towards the yard. Jimmy Jones on silver. Sheep yard at Yanunga. Not a lot coming in towards the yard. Peter and Christine out there giving a hand. Christine on the bike. Peter, followed by Zoe. Peter and Christine, plus Zoe. Yanunga house, Peter, Christine riding around on their bikes. Zoe a ride. The Sinan goats that we had for milkers, they're very good milkers too. Heading for the goat yard. Robin looking after the little kids as he often did, very helpful too. Robin and Rosemary on the little roundabout that they had to play on. Peter taking Simon for a wheel in the stroller. Now we'll have a ride on the swing. Jimmy doing a bit of tidying up around there. Oh, he said, you're taking the right picture. Christine with Rosemary in tow. Well, that was some sheep that we had that we'd sold, and we were trucking away, and there was rain the night before, and because of the flooded ground, the trucks couldn't get up to Yanunga, so we drove them down to Alaric and loaded them there. On the way down, and that's still at Yanunga. That's the next mob. But all all the children having a look at the lambs, probably the last lambs they'd see for a long time. Peggy with Simon sitting up there. Peter and Zoe. Robin finding one for herself down there. Grafting them all. Let me loaded on the truck, away they go. Road train. That was another mob that we took down to Alaric. Jimmy bringing up the rear. The transport's all backed up to the shed, running them up the ramps into the truck. There they are, on the trucks, all ready to go. There we are, back at Yanunga. Robin's looking after the little ones, like she always did. Simon and Rosemary. A bit of hibiscus that we tried to grow in the background. Robin and Simon. Finding the sun a bit glary. And Rosemary, sunrise. Out there walking the garden. Rosemary dressed up in my boots by the look of it. Peter giving Simon a ride in the stroller, accompanied by Zoe as usual. Down to Margate. After we'd left Yanunga, down on the beach, with the Norfolk pine that are much bigger nowadays. That's John McConaughey down on the beach with his kids and ours. I'll pick them out quickly enough to say which is which. Out in the boat we had, having a bit of fun there. Peter and that friend of his he went to school with. I think that must be Roger, just went across the screen. Robin. Windy, I guess. Roger. Rosemary steps of the beach. Carolyn on the left. Rosemary with a towel, having some trouble with a towel. And it's Peggy and Mother on the right. Yeah, she managed that towel at last. That's Mother rubbing her hands with a stroke off along the pool. And died not long afterwards. Still having fun with the boat. Peggy with Simon. Zoe. Roger and Rosemary. There's Bessie shepherding along the beach. Quick look at this little crab. On the swings down at Queen Beach. That was during the August holiday '64. The Sellers and the Conakys had rented houses nearby. Roger giving Simon a swing. That's Colin and Wisty's car there. There's Dad, Bessie, Mother, Wisty and Colin. Wendy and Carolyn. Simon on the ground there. There's it. Christine looking confident as ever. There's Mary. Still having trouble with the towel. Robin getting ready for a sunbake. We've got our own cricket team there. Look at them. You'd never get Peter to bowl. He just didn't seem to have the knack. Anyway, he's having fun. There's Robin and Simon. Simon's version of crawling like he always did. There's Simon's balancing act. He loved doing that, balancing on my hand. Rosemary used to do it too.